Welcome, one and all, to the Ancient Journey. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us. Today's journey, Amanda K. Jones. Just south of St. Louis, in the small town of Festus, Missouri, Brian Westfall and Amanda Jones met for lunch at the Off the Hook restaurant, which is a favorite catfish and corn nugget place among the locals. Brian and Amanda had met at a Christmas party at the local civic center, where Brian was a volunteer there and he and Amanda quickly hit it off. Amanda was a 26-year-old mom, once divorced, and she worked at a local bank. Everyone in Festus knew her and liked her. It wasn't hard to be known by everyone in Festus. After all, the town only has around 10,000 residents, but to be liked by everyone, that was something Amanda and her family took pride in. Amanda had a 4-year-old daughter, a new boyfriend in Brian, and her future was ahead of her. Brian and Amanda spent a lot of time together, and it wasn't long until Amanda had some surprising news for Brian. She was pregnant. Brian would be a father. Amanda told her sister Carrie that she was happy about being pregnant and was thrilled about having another baby. But those good feelings didn't extend to Brian Westfall. Brian, you see, had a secret, another longtime girlfriend on the side, and while a fling with Amanda may have fit into his plans, a new baby certainly didn't. Amanda told her mother that Brian didn't believe the child was even his, but out of the goodness of his heart, he would pay for an abortion. Amanda refused. Times were tough for her as a single mother already, but she couldn't imagine having an abortion. Amanda was religious and didn't believe in it. She soldiered on, prepared to raise the baby on her own. Months went by, and Amanda learned she'd be having a boy, who she planned on naming Hayden. When Hayden was almost ready to make his appearance into the world, Amanda reached out to Brian one last time. She wanted to know if he'd changed his mind and wanted to make a family with her and the soon-to-be 2 children. Brian seemed to soften a bit and invited Amanda to lunch at the Off the Hook. Amanda agreed, but only if she could fit it in after church. Amanda dressed for church and kissed her daughter Hannah goodbye and headed out the door. She left church around 1 p.m. on August 14th, 2005 to meet up with Brian. Amanda didn't show back home for several hours. Amanda's sister Carrie began to get nervous and kept calling Amanda's cell phone, getting nothing but voicemail for quite some time. Rhonda Willis, Amanda's former sister-in-law, had spoken to Amanda around 1:15, just after she would have been meeting up with Brian. She was scared by Amanda's voice over the phone. Amanda had tersely told Rhonda, "I can't talk right now," and quickly got off the phone. Amanda had never spoken to Rhonda that way. Carrie visits Amanda's house, but Amanda's nowhere to be found either. Finally, Amanda's mother, Bertha, ends up calling Brian Westfall. Brian tells Bertha that, of course, he and Amanda went to lunch, just as they'd planned. He had dropped her back off at her car around 2. Brian later called Bertha back, this time changing the story, saying Amanda was upset, she wasn't hungry, and they didn't eat lunch after all. He said that he left her around 2 at her car and she was on the phone with someone. In fact, Brian would call back 3 more times, each time giving a slightly different version of what happened. Suspicious now, Amanda's family alert local police. They search and find her car, a blue Pontiac Sunfire, at the Civic Center parking lot. Her purse and her cell phone are not in the car. By this point, they realize that Amanda didn't leave that car on her own. She's in trouble, and she needs help fast. They summon Brian Westfall to the station for an interview, but Brian arrives with a lawyer in tow, which surprises the police. He cooperates during the interview, but it strikes the police as odd that he brings a lawyer to the meeting. Brian tells police the same story that he told Amanda's family, that he and Amanda spent around an hour in the Civic Center parking lot talking about the baby. But Brian went further with the police, telling them that Amanda had mentioned that if they weren't going to be together as a couple, then Brian would need to provide support. In fact, he said Amanda even had an amount in mind, $600 per month, the same she was receiving from her ex-husband. Brian told police that he didn't think he was the father, but said the conversation was civil, although the two couldn't come to an agreement on what to do about their relationship. As far as he knew, she was still fine in her car. He also told detectives that he had driven through the parking lot around 5 p.m. and Amanda was still there, in her car, on the phone. Amanda's family knew this wasn't true. At over 8 months pregnant, Amanda was having a tough time with the summer heat as it was. The air conditioning in her car was also broken. She certainly wouldn't have sat in a sweltering car in August for several hours just to make a phone call. After that, Brian's attorney no longer allowed him to even speak to police. A search of his home was performed, but under the direction of his attorney. Police weren't allowed to search wherever they wanted to. No crime had been established, so no search warrant could be issued for the premises. The FBI eventually becomes involved, but Brian's attorney holds fast. No speaking to authorities. Brian is never charged with Amanda's disappearance. In 2019, Amanda's family made a return to the fairgrounds, this time with cadaver dogs. Dogs alerted to 2 areas on the fairgrounds, and soon a backhoe and the crime scene unit began to dig, but the search turned up nothing. To this day, Amanda and her unborn child remain missing. If you have information related to Amanda's disappearance, contact the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department at 636-797-5515 or the FBI St. Louis Field Office at 314-589-2500. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.